was young at the time. I remember when Dust to Glory, the movie, came out, sitting at recess in elementary school telling my friends about this movie about a 1,000-mile desert race. And that movie became sort of the definition and epitome of what the pinnacle of off-road racing was for me. It's always been an item on my list as an off-road racer. It's an interesting time in my life where I'm busy taking care of my family, and so it's difficult to step away, but it was a dream of mine. The invitation was awesome to be able to represent Sherco. There was something inside me and in my family that sort of inspired me to say yes, and I'm really glad that I did. I don't regret it at all. Months and weeks of time building up, preparation, communication, all of these different things finally came to an opportunity to finally have our tires hit the trail on race course. And I remember that being a pretty distinct moment as we all set off and we began covering what would be our very first experience of riding on a Baja 1000 race course. It didn't take long before we hit some of our first experiences of adversity. We had some chase vehicles that were on UTVs that experienced some radiator failures. We were burning daylight, but I was having the absolute time of my life. I was experiencing something that I have always been so drawn to be riding my motorcycle down 2-track roads, passing farms, seeing all of these different towns and areas where people had settled and were living with their families, to be riding down ridge lines and looking out across the hills and just knowing that we were in Mexico, experiencing the freedom was just, it was unlike anything I've really ever experienced. I served a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ in Colombia and lived there for 2 years from 2015 to 2017. And that was an opportunity for me to grow passionate about Latin culture, to learn a new language, to respect and learn a new culture. And Mexico's very different than Colombia, but in a lot of ways it was providing vivid flashbacks to my mission and providing me with amazing opportunities to speak the language, to get to know the people down there better. And I was just in heaven. I was having so much fun, literally talking to every single person I met down there and just asking them anything about their life, about what they did, about what they thought of the Baja 1000. And it truly was just, I was just experiencing so much joy and loving every minute of it. Dude, feels like we've lived 5 days.
Yeah, race day is gonna be a long day.
At this point in day one pre-running, we were still about 100 miles away, and we were ambitious about riding race course. Race course went directly past our hotel, so we just pressed on, continued to ride race course, and set off into the night. I remember descending some of the 2-track switchbacks and feeling the air start to change. The humidity began to be a little bit thicker in the air. I started getting sort of wafts of seawater and salt in the air, and eventually made our way all the way down to the coast, where at one point we stopped and I could hear the waves crashing up against the cliffs in complete darkness. I was so excited. We got to one point where there was a 2-track trail junction that dropped down into a small section of beach. I think it's a pretty common area for people to experience their very first exposure to dirt bikes on a beach on the West Coast. And so even under the night sky, we went down there and I got my first chance to kind of ride around on the beach. And from that point on, for the next 2 days, we would be descending along that west coast of the peninsula, just enjoying fantastic ocean views and fresh air. So we continued on in the night.
That's a scary crash. Were you moving?
Yeah, those two are cooking. You know, going into the event, I really didn't know Hunter super well. I've raced against him and competed with him a couple times at some local events, and I was excited to be able to participate with him. He's a little bit younger than me. He shares some common passions. He has a family, and I was excited at the opportunity to get to know him a little bit better. And I was really bummed. It was, hard for me to see that whole experience of him sacrificing so much and being just as willing as all of us to go down and participate in the race, and to just have it come to an end so quickly. That very first day with an injury, it was just really a bummer. I had a lot of empathy and compassion for him. It's a big experience to go out of the country, to go participate in a team event, in an international race of that scale, to navigate that whole path of new relationships, first-time handshakes, different sponsors, a different motorcycle, different gear, riding at night, new terrain. It's challenging. There's a lot of things that are just new and can make you uncomfortable. So I'm really happy that he was able to make it home. I was really happy that he got to experience that first day and that he was on our team. And the complexity of navigating that whole change, of processing the fact that we had a 4-man team, we had an injury, and now we're down to a 3-man team. What do? Do we try and tackle the whole Baja 1000 as a team of 3? Do we, call somebody that's raced it before? And it kind of throws a lot of things up in the air. And, a lot of people would be very interested and grateful and anxious to be able to have that invitation, to be that one that fulfills that spot. And I've been there. We've experienced that exact situation, not at the Baja 1000, but at a different international race. You rewind to 2021, I was participating for Team USA on the ISDE team in Italy. My brother, Kobe, had participated in the qualifier events and had just barely missed the cut, but was next in line to be on the team. We had an injury on the team. A lot of stuff was up in the air about who was going to be on, and I was an advocate. I was very, very passionate and vocal about including my brother, to have that opportunity, to have him participate with me on the team. I knew that the stars had just aligned, that we would never ever get this opportunity again, and I was willing to do anything to just make it happen. I pushed really, really hard, and at that time, we were able to make it happen. A lot of things came together. A lot of people were willing to support it. And despite the empathy and compassion for having an injury, we were passionate about fulfilling that rider, that position, in the best way possible. And I got to experience that. Kobe and I both finished the entire 2021 ISDE in Italy, and can now forever say that we were teammates on an international race and that we did it. So as we were navigating this experience in Baja, I had a lot of compassion for everybody involved. I felt bad for Hunter, but I also could see in Colton's eyes, this interest and him being an advocate and being very passionate about including his brother on the team. There was already discussion of this before the whole team had been organized. So when this occurred, it was a natural route forward. I was supportive of it in many ways, just for the fact that Caden is a great rider. He's been improving in his skill set a lot. He has 2 older brothers who are some of the best off-road riders, and particularly with Tyler being on the Honda team. So I knew that Caden is receiving instruction and guidance from some of the best people. I didn't worry about that at all. But more than anything, to me, I had empathy and compassion for Colton, who was in a position who wanted to include Caden on the team, being an advocate for him and pushing for that. And I was supportive of that because I had been in his shoes a couple years ago, and we made it happen, and I never regretted it. I was so lucky to be a part of that, to watch it play out and to observe from a different position a family that was able to have their brothers, all three of them, participate and finish in the Baja 1000. Tyler on the Honda team and Colton and Caden on the Sherco team. It truly was awesome, and it worked out in a way that I never would have expected. To me, that whole relationship is what racing is really all about. Okay, you can't even see anything, but the audio is going to be great. We're out here in the Mexican desert under the moonlight. It's been, I think we've been riding for like 11 hours. We're at mile 178. We started with 30 people, we're down to 4. And we're super close, we think, to where we're supposed to spend the night. But Reed and I just went on a last-ditch side quest effort to find it and used most of our resources. We have 4 bikes here. 2 of them are out of gas. 1 of them has some gas. So the strategy at this point is to stay together as a group. So we accomplished that. We just went from 2 people back to 4. And we're currently in the process of trying to start a fire. So
It's gonna work.
we're gonna successfully start a fire here without burning the bikes down. And then we're gonna get a game plan together to get more fuel. Yeah, I mean, running out of gas the first night was, it was unique. It was crazy. It probably ranks up there in top 5 craziest experiences I've ever had, just because of all the events that led up to it and the way that we were kind of rescued and everything. And honestly, just being that it occurred in Mexico. I've been trail riding my whole life. I've experienced mechanical failures in very, very remote areas in Idaho, in the Western United States. I've witnessed very creative mechanical solutions to fix, crazy things. So I've seen a lot. I've been around motorcycles for a long time. And what we experienced the first day pre-running, was just, it was unique in its own way because we were in Mexico. Like that adds a layer to everything where it's just a little bit different. There's just something about having it occur in Mexico where you're not quite used to the typical routine, the typical resources. The language is different. And so being there with Colton and Dylan, and Reed, there wasn't ever a point where I was super, super nervous. I felt safety being that we were kind of out in the desert in a place where it was quiet. We were just on the side of race course. I think that I felt a little self-conscious maybe beginning the pre-running with my big Klim riding vest because, most other riders were just kind of wearing their fanny packs or smaller packs, and they were a little bit more coordinated with their gear. And my Klim vest kind of stood out a little bit more. It's bigger, it's bulkier. I just feel comfortable riding with that. I have a lot of different tools there, and it was my time to shine. I was so excited to I welcome the adversity. I welcome the opportunity to fix mechanical failures. That's something I've learned in my trail riding experience. The people that I admire the most, that I like to hang around, that I like to be around when we're trail riding, are the people that when adversity comes their way, they just jump right into it. They don't waste a second. They just tackle it the best they can. And it makes riding fun. It makes you feel safe. It teaches you new skills. And so I don't like to shy away from the adversity or the mechanical failures. So when we ran out of gas, I was excited. I like our saying when we ride is it's always an adventure. And so I love when the adventure starts to play out. It's almost inevitable when you're riding like that you just expect something to happen. You just know it's just inevitable. At some point, something's gonna happen. The larger the crew, the higher the likelihood that it's gonna happen. So when that happened that first night, I was just excited. I was excited to take my tool pack off, and I've been packing flint and steel around this whole time, baby. Like, here we go. Let's go start this fire. And you know, despite watching Survivor, it wasn't quite as easy, and we also had gas, so that should have, you know, made it way easier. But we did it in a safe way, and it was so awesome. It just added to the whole adventure, to the whole feel. Colton was able to get some cell service, call his brother Tyler, who was also down there competing in the Baja 1000 on Team Honda. And out of the 1,000-mile course, Tyler was pre-running and just so happened to be about 4 miles up course from where we were stranded out of fuel. So in a heroic effort of saving us, Tyler just happened to be able to get a large water jug, fill it up with fuel, come down race course, and save us out there on the trail the first night. It was a super cool experience to be all the way down there in Mexico. Tyler and Colton are brothers, and they had at that point not been able to meet up or connect. And the first chance that they did was way out in the Mexican desert, under the moonlight and the stars, by a fire that we started because we were out of gas. So it was a pretty cool experience that I'll remember for a long, long time. You see those videos of people just doing endless wheelies on the beach, and you just know they're in Baja. There's no other place in the whole world where you can get away with that. And when you're doing it, you feel like you're just on God's world. You don't feel like you're doing anything wrong. You feel like you're doing what motorcycles were meant to be. You're living the life that you were supposed to live, and it's just complete freedom. And I was so excited to be able to do that. It wasn't the fact that I was seeing the ocean, it was the fact that I was in Mexico on a motorcycle seeing the ocean. You combine those three things, and it literally was just amazing. And for the next 3 days, we just absolutely enjoyed the heck out of it. Being able to ride wheelies, to go wherever we want, to meander right near the water and then go back up into the hills for a little while, and then always have that landmarker of that coastline, that defined coastline all the way down the peninsula, was just absolutely amazing. I've had experience racing all over the world. I've raced in mountains, I've raced in desert, I've raced in coastal areas, I've raced in inland areas, and I've seen lots of different vegetation. And you know, a lot of vegetation, a lot of terrain is pretty pleasant. You know, pine trees, nice bushes, or you know, green grass. But there is a hostility in Mexico that is unmatched in anywhere I've ever been. The desert is ruthless. The vegetation is hell-bent on hurting you in every way, shape, and form. To be in Baja, Mexico, my good friend Corey has a saying that he always says every time we go to Tecate, where he just talks about the vegetation, and he says, everything here wants to kill you. And he's referring to the vegetation. He's referring to the cacti, the plants, the bushes. We left the coastline and we got to an area a little bit farther inland, and we paused at one point, and I took a video where I literally almost turned 360 degrees, and I couldn't even describe the different species of cacti that I saw, how many different ones I saw, tall ones, skinny ones, chubby ones, just like every type of cacti imaginable. And I just couldn't even imagine what it would be like if you went barreling off that trail into the thorns. Shortly after that, I impacted a large cactus on the right side of the trail, and just so happened to pull my hand away really quickly right before the impact occurred. Pulled over and looked. The stock handguards on a Sherco are not the most durable. I will admit that. You can have Cycra handguards, or you know, some of these different handguards that are aftermarket parts today that are much thicker that probably would have prevented this. But that being said, they're still thick plastic. A 2-inch needle penetrated completely through the plastic, and I thought how terrible that would be to go in your knuckles. So it was just another very real reminder of, the types of little things that could happen down there that would just, really make it a bad day, as simple as that is. And so I did my very best to avoid all of that vegetation, to stay far away of it, to respect it, and distance myself. Late Wednesday night, we were traveling back from a long week of pre-running, making our way back to Ensenada. And as we got a little bit closer, it was important priority for us to go test the race bike, to do a shakedown ride. We had done a shakedown ride back in Utah before we left, but in our rush to prepare a race bike and in our rush as a team, when we got the bikes delivered so close to the event, there still was a handful of aftermarket parts that had been added to the bike between levers and stabilizer and GPS and other devices. It was just important for us that before we initiated a 1,000 mile adventure, we did one final shakedown ride. It was a little bit difficult as a team just because there was a lot of effort put forth into making a very clean presence, to have a very organized team aesthetically. But at the same time, it was important to us as riders that we also accomplish this goal of doing some brief testing and a shakedown ride to ensure that the parts were functioning properly. Colton and his younger brother Caden were able to do a test ride the day before the race. They ran into a couple electrical issues where the light system was drawing a lot of power on the battery. We still have a lot of testing to do. It's only been a couple days since we've gotten back, and we have a lot of things to learn as a team. However, in the short period of time that they were testing that evening, they unfortunately killed the battery and were kind of stranded in the hills. They were able to get a jumper cable, get the bike back, and the next day we only have 14 hours before the race starts, and we are trying to troubleshoot and process some of the issues that we may have struggled with that night before, and also could potentially be a risk to ending our race during the 1,000. With a lot of discussion amongst the team, we eventually concluded that it would be necessary to make a couple electrical changes to reduce the draw on the battery and just give ourselves a little bit better chance to have a more stable electrical system during the race. Now, this really was just nobody's fault. This was a very dynamic team that was composed completely of people who were volunteering their time and effort. This entire team also was organized just weeks before the Baja 1000, where other teams are preparing for the entire year for the Baja 1000. So really, to set the stage and make sure that everybody's comfortable with this open discussion, it really was honestly nobody's fault. It was just the reality of trying to accomplish what we were trying to accomplish. So it really made me nervous. I, to be honest, was really nervous that we were going to be faced with some sort of challenge that was going to end our race early. So I was doing everything I could to be respectful and kind and navigate this tricky time with constrained timeline where we're T-minus 10 hours at this point. We're getting closer and closer to the starting line, and we're throwing things together. We're, diving back into the motorcycle, making changes, and just praying that things work. So to say that I was nervous was just an understatement. I was very nervous that the bike was gonna make it through. And thanks to everybody on the team, thanks to all of the riders, even though we faced adversity the next day and we ran into a couple of the things that we just were really trying to avoid, we still made it happen and we just got the bike through. So the important lesson in all that is that going all the way back to the Dust to Glory days when Johnny Campbell and Steve Hengeveld are talking about the event, it just comes down to doing your homework, doing your prep work. Like, preparation, I learned, is absolutely everything at Baja. And as a team, we learned so many things that we'll be able to take and move forward. Another great lesson is that the base foundation and platform of the Sherco motorcycle has been a great platform to build off of. The engine case, the motor, the crank is strong. It's very resilient. The frame, the swing arm, the wheels, the chassis itself is a very robust motorcycle that worked great against the elements. It's really refining some of those unique details. And I've never participated in an event that requires so much demand on the electrical system. Between the GPS, the lights, and the Stella, which is a unique GPS particular to the event that triggers the checkpoints, that informs you of the speed zones, all of these electrical devices are drawing upon the battery. And these are not usually things that we run at all of our races back at home. So with all that being said, it was a great opportunity for us to learn and grow as a team. It made me really nervous. I didn't know if it was going to happen, but we did it and we finished. I've participated in ISDE 5 times, and what's so cool about ISDE is that you're there representing your country. So you're just very, very proud. You're very, very proud to be there representing your country. But the experience of participating in Contingency, or the sign-up process and the opening ceremonies at Baja 1000, is literally unlike anything I have ever seen in my whole life. The energy is just unmatched. The anticipation and really the power that is there is unparalleled in any other motorsport event I've ever seen. Really due to the combination of the different classes. At Baja 1000, you're not just restricted to the motorcycle classes. You have the two-wheeled motorcycle classes, but you also have this plethora of unlimited four-wheeled machines, with the premier class being the Trophy Truck Unlimited class. To walk around and see all of those trophy trucks and the teams and the effort and the money and the resources that go into them, I never could have described in words the magnitude and the scale that this event operates on. I knew that it was the Baja 1000, but until I went down and experienced it with my own eyes, I can't really even describe like the scale and the energy and the power that you feel when you see those trucks and you see the logistical operations that they go to, the extent that they go to just to make it happen. All of the resources and time just for one of those trucks. The helicopters are just insane. And you blend that with the locals and all of their families, that it's literally like every single one of their national holidays rolled up into one. Like, they love it more than anything else that occurs all year long. Here at home, I go to a motorcycle race and it's fun, but it's more normal for everybody. Down there, if you put on a hat or a team jersey, you are just an absolute superhero. And they treat you like a superhero. And it's just fun. It's just fun for everybody. It's fun for the riders and the participants. It's fun for the spectators. And I was just in awe the whole time to see really the scale at which everything operated. I slept from about 1:30 a.m. to 4:30 a.m. Right before I went to bed, I was watching the tracker and saw that Colton had begun the race. It was really hard for me, being as anxious and as excited as I was to participate in the race, to watch the tracker and know that the race has begun and then have to lay my head down on the pillow and go to sleep. It was a really weird experience, something that I've never had, where the race is on, but it's time to sleep. I mean, that experience of watching the tracker was just on my mind. I just was refreshing, just watching the tracker as close as I could. And I watched it in live time happen, where the motorcycle starts deviating from the race course, it stops, it turns around, it goes some more. And this is all an indicator to me that maybe a navigational error is occurring, but that something is wrong. This is all occurring at 4:30 in the morning, and I'm, 150 miles away on the other side of the peninsula, just refreshing with my weak internet connection, trying my best to see what's going to happen. At one point, the tracker just stops. It's refreshing, but the position is in the same spot. Every minute that goes by, a new update that the tracker is in the same position. 0 feet moved in the last minute. The next minute goes by, 0 feet moved, and I know that he's stuck. And that's kind of where my heart sank, where I essentially just realized that my fear that the race could possibly end that early was now kind of becoming a reality. And so going over that emotion of kind of processing and digesting that was not as bad as I expected. I knew that that was a very, very high possibility the whole time. And I've been around motorcycles my whole life. It's happened to me many, many times. I've seen it happen to other people many, many times. And to DNF, to not finish, is something that's it's a common occurrence in off-road motorcycle racing. Unfortunately, it was playing out that was going to be our reality. So to experience that low of an emotion and to come back from that only an hour later was just a roller coaster of emotions. To just be so low on sleep, to just be in the depths of just not knowing if we were going to finish, and pretty much conceding and accepting that I wasn't ever going to see the motorcycle and that we weren't going to finish the Baja and I was never even going to be able to ride in the race was pretty sad realization. So to say that I'm excited and grateful that I even was able to participate in any degree at the Baja, let alone finish the whole thing, is just an understatement, because it truly was just the most exciting thing for me, to be grateful that we did do it and we did finish. Props to Colton for being able to navigate that whole situation in the middle of the dark. I mean, it's so challenging to troubleshoot, especially in a panic, especially in the intensity and the rhythm of a race. It's very hard to focus on what it is that you need to do to troubleshoot. Even simple things can just completely be overlooked. So props to Colton for taking the time to troubleshoot and to find the source, because once he did, he was able to solve it, and he got the bike back to a point where it was functioning well, and he was able to ride it all the way to the rider exchange. So that was a very difficult thing to do in the middle of the night, and he did it. Baja is a place where it was my first time, but I heard the saying continually throughout the whole week, where if it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen in Baja. And that proved to be true, where you imagine the scale of the race, and it's any given race in the United States is 80 to maybe 100 miles, and the Baja 1000 is 1,000 miles. You're tasked with completing 10 consecutive races back to back to back to back to back, and having all of them go well to where you're finishing all of them. It's like completing an entire season of racing in 24 hours and not making a mistake so major that you end it. So adversity came our way. At mile 220, the clutch system failed on the motorcycle, and the clutch plates had backed out and were no longer tightened against each other, and were slipping and producing a lot of heat and reducing and just eliminating the clutch friction properties that they have. So Dylan rode from mile 220 all the way to mile 315 with literally no clutch at all in the motorcycle, which to me is just unbelievable, because I pre-rode that section and there were ledges and rocks and downhills and washes and uphills and all sorts of different types of terrain that would just be extremely difficult to navigate with no clutch at all. He was able to get through that section and just tolerate it just enough to keep riding and get to a point where at mile 315 they could have some access to the team and make a decision on how to move forward. Luckily at that point there was a spare motorcycle. being that it's so logistically difficult to travel down there and the chaos of passing tools, they did not have the proper tools in place to change the clutch. But it was necessary because the clutch was gone. So they made it happen. They pulled the clutch out of the spare motorcycle, took the clutch out of the race bike, and with screwdrivers and different tools were able to hold the clutch basket just enough to torque down the clutch, the hub nut, and get all those new plates in there. From that point on, the clutch worked fantastic the rest of the race. And it was just a testament that, I mean, no matter what you do with preparation, it's just inevitable that things are going to happen and you're going to have to adapt.
Hey, be careful.
Got everything you need?
Yeah, I think I'm set.
At that point in the race, it was 3 p.m. the day of the race. We'd already been racing for 13 hours. I mean, we'd gone through electrical issues. We'd gone through clutch issues. We were 2.5 hours back. We were passing teams in the sportsman class. All that occurring just in the 13 hours of racing, let alone this entire week leading up with pre-running and all of the complexities that we dealt with. I mean, at this point, I had been through a lot. We as a team had been through a ton, and I hadn't even gotten on a motorcycle yet. All of this occurred before my race even started. So it was a big change when I finally got on the motorcycle. That was like kind of the pinnacle moment of all of this buildup for me to finally have that tire change occur. The bike arrives with Dylan. They fill it up with gas. I put my goggles on. I click start on my GoPro, and I cheer everybody on, and finally, click third gear and rip off into the wash that began my section. It was kind of a surreal experience because I'm constantly kind of surrounded by people and team members and, having discussions and talking about things the whole week leading up. And at this moment, now I am out there completing and fulfilling what it is that I've been down here to do, and I'm by myself and I'm just riding. was very peaceful. It was very sort of just fun for me. It was the whole purpose. It was very fulfilling to be out there and just doing what I know how to do. It's just ride a motorcycle. It was so much worry and so much thought and concern had gone into all of this from my family, my wife, and my close family and relatives. I'd never participated in the Baja 1000, and it was concerning. We've been able to observe from a distance. We know that it's a large-scale off-road event, that there's risk involved. But when I was finally out there in the desert, just riding, I felt the best that I had felt all week. I was I was just finally at peace with what it was that I was doing. And I was able to just focus and finally be really present in the moment. I rode my section, and I did my very best. I hit my marks. I navigated well. I kept the bike upright. I hit my fuel stops. And although I was faced with some physical challenges towards the end where I got really depleted on energy, I continued pressing forward and making up time and doing the best that I could. When it comes to the terrain, this all kind of goes back to one of the very first meetings that we had as a team. We met at the shop in Utah County. We pulled out a big map of the 57th annual Baja 1000, the 2024 race course. And we traced with our finger all of the whole course, and we talked as a team and what the best strategy would be to kind of divide up the race course amongst us as 4 riders. Colton took section 1, Dylan took section 2, passing me the bike at mile 470, and I agreed to ride from mile marker 470 all the way to mile marker 660, essentially taking on all of the San Felipe section. From any person that I had talked to, whether they were a spectator, whether they had participated in the Baja for years, whether they'd only been down there a single time, it did not matter. The one constant piece of information that was shared was the San Felipe whoops. I did not have an opportunity to experience the San Felipe whoops until Wednesday before the event. That was my first opportunity to head out and pre-run my section. And honestly, it was eye-opening in a way. I have experienced many types of aggressive terrain in my racing. I've raced all sorts of different types of whoops, and I've seen terrain that's been really, really chewed up. But I have never experienced racing soft terrain like the San Felipe Desert that has been eroded and torn up by 1,000 horsepower trophy trucks. And that's what the San Felipe whoops are. They're different. They're unlike anything that I've ever raced. There's similarities, there's techniques that overlap from other things that I've done, but they were a new challenge for me. The first section of my 190 mile leg included whoops that were of a harder compact dirt, and the trophy trucks carried the sediment to the backside of the whoops, and they impacted the front of the whoop, making a super steep face and a very challenging obstacle. And there's so much pre-running occurring and so much racing occurring down there that no matter what direction you go, you just almost can't get away from it. That was a very aggressive section of terrain that I knew was probably going to be the most physically demanding of my whole section. I was lucky that it was at the beginning, that it was only about 20 miles into my section. So I was able to reserve and have some energy to tackle that pretty early on. The remainder of my leg included what I would describe as trophy truck style whoops, or trophy truck whoops, that were really deep but really spaced out because of the longer wheelbase. And luckily I was able to navigate these types of terrain with a little bit more technique and a little bit more speed, but they are ruthless in that they are so deep and so long, and they never end, that you literally can never sit down. You never can get a break. You're constantly searching for something that you can do to just try to be able to continue moving forward with just a little less energy and a little less effort, and you just can't. No matter what you do, no matter how you position your body or grip the motorcycle, it just requires effort. And so it's just grueling for mile after mile after mile. And another challenge that I faced at the Baja was you become sort of adapted or naive to the distances. Because you're always discussing a 1,000-mile race, 200 miles can start to feel a little insignificant in light of the entire scale of the full race. When you take any particular section, it's still 5 miles of whoops. It's still 10 miles of whoops, or 50 miles of whoops, or 200 miles of whoops. So you stack that up against anything that we typically race here back at home, and it's just not even comparable with how the distances and how long. So that was something that I really underestimated in my experience, that I'm now glad that I have had that experience, because it truly was, it was not an easy 200-mile section. At some point in my section, it really just all caught up to me, where I found myself literally completely depleted of energy and nearly falling asleep on the motorcycle, which is something that hasn't happened to me since I was like 4 years old. And it was a combination of all of the different forms of exertion that had occurred throughout the whole week. If I had just been tasked with just riding that section and had a flawless prep and knew exactly what to expect, and our race had gone so well up into that point, so much so that I wouldn't have had to exert all of that mental energy and concern early on, I would have been in a position of much more strength and much better equipped to handle that section. But because of the reality of where I was and how much had gone on, I simply had reached my capacity. I was depleted beyond really anything that I've experienced in the last couple of years, to a point where I was desperate to just continue moving forward. And it feels sort of guilty admitting that, being that I had team members, specifically Reed, who was Ironmanning the entire class, taking on 4 or 5 times as much as I was. So it feels kind of difficult for me to admit that, but that was the reality. I really was struggling with energy and focus. My ability to process the terrain just completely was decreasing, to a point where I was having to really slow my pace down. And because of how difficult the terrain was with staying on top of the whoops, that as I slowed down, I couldn't go at a pace where I was able to stay on top of the whoops. I had to concede to just essentially just rolling the whoops. My one saving grace in all of it really was the opportunity to get some food, some sustenance at some point throughout the whole race. Leading up to the event, I had some breakfast, and then being out in the desert waiting for 5-6 hours before the bike got to me, I had some fruit for lunch, but I did not have that much fuel in my body, and I was out of it. I was out of gas. So I stopped at a pit area in the middle of the night. The wind was blowing. They had a campfire, and I thought it was an area where I was going to need to get fuel. I checked my map and saw that it was a couple more miles down. But as I sat there near this group of locals with their family, they were grilling up a nice carne asada, and I could smell it. The fire looked super warm, and I was feeling it. So I was like, I got to keep going, but I need food. So I asked them if they could prepare me a taco. And they generously grabbed a big old flour tortilla, loaded it up with carne asada and guacamole, and I was just so grateful. They brought that thing over, and I enjoyed every bite of energy that fueled my body. They gave me 2 Gatorades. I drank everything, and that was like the saving grace for me. It was something I've never experienced in my whole life, never even consider. I'm a competitive person. If I'm racing, I'll sacrifice. I'm going to get the job done. But I knew at that point that my body was just in need of energy. And that saved me. My section of the race course navigated all across this barren, open, deserted desert out there in San Felipe. There's a handful of dirt roads, maybe every once in a while the very lonely ranch, but for the most part, that side of the peninsula, in my observation, was way more desolate than the coastline on the west side. But I couldn't believe, as I participated in the race, As I navigated near road crossings or any other significant landmark out there in the desert, I was witnessing just communities of locals in their pickup trucks and their campers and their vehicles out there to support and spectate and be involved in any way possible. And it was cold. As the sun went down, the temperatures dropped. They had campfires, they had food, and I have never witnessed in my life any level of spectators that would even come remotely close to matching that. And to be so remote and so far out there, it was just absolutely crazy. I would navigate near pit areas and just ride through nearly a mile or two of just people lining the course on either side, cheering you on, and in any way just being willing to help you. Some of the major pits were just, they looked like cities out in the desert with so many people out there. Particularly when I was arriving at mile 660 at the north end of the course was one particular area where it was just like the largest pit area that you've ever seen at any off-road race, just in the middle of the night with activity and lights and campfires and music, and just multiplied by 10, just as big as you can imagine. And it was just amazing to see that. The whole Sherco team was there when I passed the bike over at mile 660, and after the struggles that I had with kind of hitting the wall with energy and becoming really depleted, it was a great lift to my spirits to be able to get to that pit and just have them cheering me on and just being there for me at that point where I was really tired. It really made a difference in my spirits and how I felt I contributed to the race.
Kick my ass.
At most off-road races, after I finish, I immediately just go into recovery mode. I'm fueling my body, I'm replenishing my hydration, and then oftentimes going back to sleep to recover my energy. But at this point, I had finished my leg late at night, passed the bike over to Caden, and it wasn't long before things started to happen where I knew it was going to be a long night and I wasn't going to sleep. Caden was faced with probably the most adversity of any of us riders on the team. Despite the electrical mechanical issues that Colton experienced, or the clutch issues that Dylan had, or the physical exertion that I had to exert to get through the whoop section, Caden was faced with navigating 100% of his section at night. He also didn't even pre-run a single mile. He was tasked with riding during the coldest temperatures and most aggressive weather that we experienced the whole time, with rain and wind that were just battering him through the night. He was faced with the longest time stranded out there, nearly 3 hours. He was stuck without fuel for 2 hours and 45 minutes. And above all, our greatest fear was starting to manifest itself in that his tracker stopped working and the trophy trucks were coming. At night, in the middle of the desert, when you hear those engines, the whole earth shakes. We were sitting there on the side of the highway listening to the rain hit the windshield and just wondering and trying our best to refresh to see where Caden was on the tracker. I knew that he was going to be safe and taken care of. I knew that he was smart. I didn't worry about him there, but it was just, we didn't have the answer yet. We weren't able to confirm exactly where he was, where up until that point in the race, we were keeping a great eye, near perfect tracking of where everybody was. And as soon as all of that came to a head, of course the tracker stops working. Luckily, thanks to the team for doing our best to communicate with one another, and really thanks to Reed for sacrificing even more time in his race, he was able to deliver fuel to Caden enough to get him to the next fuel stop and allowed him to continue on in the race and push through the night. He definitely faced the most adversity and was the toughest of all of us. He pushed all the way through to the finish line and delivered the bike to the finish line near 4:30 or 5 a.m., a full 28 hours after we'd started the race.
Like tonight, we got a lot more coming through, and we have 96X. We got all the bike over here. Jaden, how you feel? You guys, congrats. Welcome back to
When I got invited to participate in the Baja 1000, I knew that personally my only goal was to just finish. It was my first time ever racing it. It was the first time for every one of us on the pro team. So to go down there and have an expectation that we were going to be able to perform super, super well in the pro class was a little bit out of just the realistic expectations for us. And usually I don't like to say that. I usually am just dream big and go for it. And I generally live my life that way. But I think adjusting my expectations, and personally the whole time, I was just set on just trying to finish. And as the week progressed and as I spent more time with my team members, with Colton and Dylan and Hunter and Caden, we discussed that. We talked about where we felt like we fit in. We agreed that, mutually for us, it was really the big accomplishment was finishing. I didn't want to go down and put this heroic effort into just going too fast and not finishing. That to me didn't mean anything. The thing that means the most to me is, even if it was 10 hours after the first bike, like just finishing, just crossing the finish line was everything. And that definitely played a role in how the week went, because I think that the team and everybody with great intentions and great priorities and objectives, I think we maybe missed the mark a little bit with really what our goal was, being a first time. It's complex to have that many people involved, and to have everybody meet for the first time also just adds a layer of it's just new. It's new for everybody. There were a lot of new kind of moving parts with the whole team, and a lot of this was put together really quickly before the Baja 1000. So to have the bikes show up just a couple weeks before the race, we did not have the time to test for months on end and really dial in our suspension and our lights and our electrical system. We had to throw together, to the best of our knowledge, what we know works best, and just hope that it's going to work during the 1,000-mile race. We had a team that was there, that had our backs, that was supportive, but we also just had to accept the fact that, this was the first time for any of us racing the Baja 1000. It was the first time for any of us in the Pro Unlimited class, and it was also the first time for Sherco in the Pro Unlimited class. So I think we learned some very valuable lessons, where this is really, it was a building year. It was simply an opportunity to just learn, to gain experience, and to just build, to have a foundation. And to me, all along, I knew that the best foundation we could build off of was simply just finishing the event. The speed, the intensity, the logistics, all of that comes later on. But if we, miss the mark with finishing, then we just, next year, that just becomes the goal again, is to just simply finish. Now we know we can do it. We know we can finish, and we can just go from here. After Caden crossed the finish line, it was finally a moment where everybody was able to celebrate and just take a big, deep breath. And really from that point on, it was just traveling home, getting home safe, and just processing everything that happened during the entire event. So it really was not possible without Reed, Dave, and Joe orchestrating and coordinating this entire effort. Thank you to Reed for putting together the team. Thank you for Dave and Joe for backing the whole team financially, for coordinating all of the efforts with Sherco, for reaching out to Young Powersports. Thank you to Young Powersports for supporting the team with 2 strong vehicles that were able to carry the whole team all around Mexico and support us. Thank you to Klim Racing for equipping us with gear, helmets, goggles, gloves, jersey, and pants. For Leatt boots for protecting our feet. It was the first time I experienced wearing those boots, and they were extremely comfortable and lasted the entire trip no problem. Thanks to EVS for the goggles and for the knee braces, keeping us safe and protected. And for every other person and team member that was involved, the parents, the friends, the cousins, everybody that was there supporting the team. It was a tremendous effort to coordinate all of it, to make it happen, and most importantly, to get everybody back home safely. So thank you guys for tuning in, watching this video. For me, it was an experience of a lifetime. I fell in love with Baja, and I don't know exactly how it looks moving forward, but I will be involved in some way to help continue this experience and share this experience with Baja with others.